Connisti, how are ye? Welcome to the Candlelit Tales podcast. This is part 4 of our 5-part series of the Táin for November, our Patreon Appreciation Month. I'm sitting here in the shoffice with my brother Aaron.
And I am cold, because it's cold. But I am delighted to tell you that we have lots more podcasts coming, because each week we are releasing one podcast per week. It's not always possible because we can't always get it sorted, but this month we are, because it's our birthday and we're going back to the Táin, one part every week. If you haven't tuned into the part 1, part 2, part 3, well, you should probably do that right now. So go back and have a listen, or listen to part 4 coming up.
The warrior that was sent for was Ferdia, son of Táin, greatest son of the whole tribe of Táin. And it was well known that he was the only one in Maeve's army who could possibly be a true challenge for Cuchulainn. But Ferdia refused the summons. You see, he had trained with Cuchulainn on the island of Scahach, with the teachers Scahach and Uachtacht and Aoife, and he loved Cuchulainn like a brother. And so Maeve sent to him 3 satirists, to make 3 satires that would raise 3 blisters on his face, blisters of shame and blemish and reproach, so full of poison that they would kill him at the end of 9 days. And when Ferdia saw the satirists coming, then he answered Maeve's summons, because it was better to die at the hand of a warrior than to die by the tongue of a satirist. Maeve welcomed Fergus into her tent, and she offered him great rewards. Vast, rich, fertile lands in Connacht that would be his and guaranteed to be his sons' and grandsons' property as well, until the end of life and of time. She offered him a place at every feast in Cruachan, but with no obligation to ever attend their assemblies, if he chose not to. And she offered him the hand of her daughter, Finnever of the Fair Eyebrows, in marriage. But Ferdia said,
I'll want more than just those. I'll need 6 pledges from 6 honourable men to witness whatever you offer me today.
Now he might have expected Maeve to take that as an insult, to say, effectively, that her word was worth nothing unless it was witnessed. But Maeve just said, you may have whatever you wish for. She named 6 of the most honourable men in Connacht and said, ask them for their guarantees, ask them for their securities. Only tell me, Ferdia, what you want, and I will give it to you. There is nothing you can ask for that I will not give.
Oh, it is a bitter woman you are, and not a gentle wife to a husband, but a fit queen with your high talk and your harsh strength.
And so Maeve offered him jewels. She offered him her gold brooch with its hooked fastening. She offered him such treasures that everyone there in that company exclaimed about how great an offering it was. But still Ferdia said,
I wouldn't take the land and the sea unless the sun and the moon were with it, because half of my heart is his, and I have the half of Cuchulainn's heart as well. Now you may tell the hound without blemish that Scahach without fear made a prophecy that I would be put down by him in a ford.
Maeve said to her people, the way that she would stir him up, it's a true word that Cuchulainn spoke then, when he said you were afraid to fight him for fear that he would put you down in the first moment of the fight.
Well, then Ferdia rose up angry now. He said that it was wrong for Cuchulainn to have said this, and he said, I swear by my arms that if he said this, I will fight him tomorrow.
Well, every man has the right to defend their province, and sure, it was wrong to think that he should be able to do more for Ulster than you should do for Connacht. So go on then, and fight him in the morning.
With that, Ferdia went to his tent, and though he slept well at the start of the night, he woke in the second part, and he stayed awake. And he had much thought of the fight that was to come, and so he had his chariot yoked and made himself ready to set out for the ford. He got to the ford and lay down then, and he sat in deep contemplation, waiting for Cuchulainn as he meditated on the fight to come. Now Cuchulainn slept in that morning because he didn't want anyone from the men of Ireland to think that he was waking up early for fear of fighting whoever came to the ford that morning. He jumped into his chariot with Laig. Now the Balanochs and Bacanochs and witches sounded in the hills around him as they would when he went down towards the ford. The trampling of his horses going as swift as a hawk diving from on high made him move as fast as a river flowing off a cliff. When Ferdia saw Cuchulainn come down to the ford this way, he called out to him, "Good Cuchulainn, when we were with Skak in our island training with Oakduk and with Aoife, back then you were just my serving boy."
That may be so, but that's not the story we'll be told after today. We used to go into hard fights together. We used to learn together every day. How is it you're come here?
We may have trained together back then, but today we fight. And you will be in much want of the healing and the healers after I've dealt with you.
I haven't been in want of a healer yet, and I've fought armies.
You have a heart of a bird in a cage. Now fight now, will you?
It's not right for you to say that to me. We used to practice together on Skahawk's Island. We went into battle together because we were fearless. We were heart companions. We shared a bed. We used to go into hard fights. We used to go into every wilderness and forest together. You've gone mad. It's not right that you should be coming here against me because of the tricks of Oliel and of Maeve, buying you with gifts and bribes. Finniver was offered to you, her hand in marriage. Well, let me tell you about Finniver. She's been offered to many men in this fight, and every one of them has come down to challenge me. I've put an end to him. And if she was offered to me, I wouldn't fight you. I wouldn't let any woman come between the two of us.
Well, Cuchulainn of the wonderful feats, although we learned knowledge together and knew friendship in forging, it's been too long we've been talking about this. For today I will give you your first wounds. So tell me, what arms shall we use today?
You were the first one down to the ford today. So you have choice of weapons, not me.
Well, do you remember the light casting spears we used to practice with Skak and with Oakduk and with Aoife?
I remember them well.
So they gathered their round-handled spears, their quill spears, ivory-shafted spears, 8 of each of them they had, and they drove their chariots up and down the sides of the river, throwing and casting these spears at one another, and not one of them missed their target. They kept shooting with these light spears all throughout the morning, until they were blunted with their heavy shields. They kept fighting from the twilight of the early morning into the fullness of the day, and all their spears were used, and their aim was perfect, but their defense was even better, so that neither one of them drew blood from the other. Then Cuchulainn called,
"What weapons will we use next? You have the choice till night, and all my spears are blunted from hitting up against your shield."
"We'll use the straight spears next." And they cast those straight longer spears just as they had cast the light throwing darts. But their defense was brilliant once more, but their throwing was even better this time round, and each one of them had heavy wounds on them by the time night fell. Then Ferdia called, "Let us leave this now."
We'll leave it if the time has come.
Each of them walked into the middle of the ford then, and they hugged one another. They clasped their hands and gave each other 3 kisses. Their horses stayed in the same paddock that night, and their chariot drivers shared a fire as they made a bed full of green feathers for each of the fighters. Healers came to Cuchulainn then and put herbs and ointments on his skin. And for all the healing herbs that Cuchulainn got, he sent the same over the river to Ferdia. Now Ferdia was provided for by all the men of Ireland with food and drink, and he sent over provisions to Cuchulainn so that he would get the same.
Now Maeve took this opportunity to send a band away to Cooley and drive away the brown bull before them. This the longest time Cuchulainn had been at the ford fighting anyone since the treaty had been made. The next day, Ferdia and Cuchulainn met again at the ford. And on this day it was Cuchulainn's turn to choose their weapons. And he chose the great, broad spears. Now on that day they fought so hard, and they fought so fiercely, and they wounded each other so sorely, that if it was the custom of the birds of the air to fly through the open wounds of men, they could have flown through the bodies of Cuchulainn and of Ferdia. They carried on until the day grew dark. The dusk crept over them. And then Ferdia said,
"We are not bound to go on forever now. And now that we're tired, we should leave this."
"Well, let's leave it now, if the time has come." And so they cast their spears aside, and they met in the middle of the ford, and they embraced one another, gave each other 3 kisses. And that night, their chariot drivers housed the horses in the same paddock. They themselves shared a fire. And Ferdia sent half the provisions given to him by the men of Ireland across the river to Cuchulainn. Beds of red rushes were made for the 2 heroes for them to rest on. But on the 3rd day when they rose, Cuchulainn saw that there was a darkness on Ferdia, a strange look on his face. And Ferdia said,
"There is not a man in Ireland would stand against me today."
And Cuchulainn replied, "I curse that king and queen that has tempted you with Finnever to come against your fellow." And the 2 of them agreed that it was a day for sword fighting, and so they drew their long swords out. And that day the fighting was vicious, and it was bloody. They hacked lumps out of each other until the night came. That night, they did not embrace. Each went their own way with hard looks. And that night, their charioteers built 2 separate fires. They put the horses into 2 separate paddocks. When Cuchulainn was brought healing herbs by those who attended him, he did not send any of them over the river to Ferdia. And Ferdia did not share his provisions with Cuchulainn.
The next morning, Ferdia woke early and came to the ford before sunrise. He knew that day that one of them would fall, or both of them. He put on his shirt of striped silk, an apron of purified iron, and his brown tunic wrapped tightly around, for he had fear of Cuchulainn's magic spear that Skahak gave him, the Gaebolga. He took his strong spear on his left side and his curved sword on his right, with red gold on the hilt. And he put on him his heavy bossed shield onto his back. Then he went to the ford and took about making great feats then. None of these he'd ever learnt from anyone, but he made up some of the greatest feats ever to be seen in Ireland.
Cuchulainn saw the feats that Ferdia was making by the ford. And he turned to Laig and he said, every one of those feats is going to be used against me today in the battle, Laig. Every one of those skills that Ferdia is practicing. And I've never seen the like of them in all my days. So now what I need from you is when you see my courage flagging, when you see me hesitate to strike at Ferdia, who was my friend, I need you to goad me. I need you to insult me. I need you to call me names so that my anger will rise in me. And when you see me doing well against Ferdia, when you see me press him, I need you to praise me and keep the courage high in me. Because without this, I'm in fear for my life.
Ferdia finished the last of his great feats. He saw Cuchulainn walking towards him then, and he called to him, asking him what weapons they would use that day.
Well, let us try the ford feat. The feat of the ford. Let us meet together in the middle of the shallow place in this river.
Ferdia agreed, but his heart was heavy for doing so, for he knew that Cuchulainn had killed everyone fighting at the ford in this great feat. They waded into the middle of the ford with the water rushing around their ankles, and they began their great fight, thrusting spear, blocking with shield, and stabbing with sword. The two pillars of courage of the Gael, brought together for this fighting through the stirring up and trouble-making of All-Eel and of Maeve. But by the middle of the day, they were hot with the heat of this fight. Then Cuchulainn leapt onto the boss of Ferdia's shield so he might thrust his spear towards him, but Ferdia kicked the shield with his knee, throwing Cuchulainn off him. A second time, Cuchulainn leapt towards him, onto the boss of his shield, and this time Ferdia used his elbow to cast Cuchulainn aside. Laig mocked him then, saying, "You are like a child, Cuchulainn, cast away by a parent who is in a tantrum. You are like a wee fairy fighter." Cuchulainn got angry then, and his hero light shone around him, so that he had the appearance of a god. And with his temper lost, he ran at Ferdia. So close was the fighting, they shattered the spears from their points to the hilt. So close was their fighting that there was no air between them as their swords danced around between them. So close was the fight, the Bananoks, Bacanoks, and demons of the air shouted and cried around. So great was the fight that the animals and the horses and prisoners the men of Ireland had stolen began to break and run away. The water of the river and the ford ran from the heat of this deadly fight, and they were using the edges of their swords, and Ferdia found a gap in Cuchulainn's defense, and he made a strike at his body, and his blood ran into the water, running away from them then, and Cuchulainn, feeling this now, called for the Gaebolga. Ferdia heard this and cried to hear it, lowering his shield. Laig threw down the Gaebolg, and Cuchulainn caught it with his foot. He made a quick move and cast the spear over his shield, making a great throw of his hand straight through Ferdia's armour and out the other side, so the sharpened end could be seen. Ferdia fell, and as he fell, he said, "It is enough. My end is come. I have not done well in this battle. You have killed me, Cuchulainn."
Cuchulainn ran and caught him, dragged him to the north side of the ford, so that he should be with him in his death. All the men of Ireland were rising up and coming towards him. Cuchulainn could only grieve. It is my grief, Ferdia, son of Damon, not to be riding his horses through the long days of his lifetime. And all of it, all these fights at the ford, all these battles with the army, all of it was a game, and all of it was a sport, until Ferdia came to the ford. Then through the advancing army, Cuchulainn saw a shining figure coming through. But the strange thing was that no one in the army of the men of Ireland seemed to notice him or react to him at all. He pointed this out to Laig, and Laig wondered at it, but Cuchulainn told him it was one of the Tuatha De Danann. Indeed, it was none other than Lugh Lá Fada, Cuchulainn's father from the other world. Cuchulainn lay bleeding, for Ferdia had buried his sword in Cuchulainn's body. He lay cradling the body of Ferdia as Lugh came over to him. And Lugh brought Cuchulainn to the grave of the Lurga and told him to lie down there and close his eyes and take a healing sleep. Cuchulainn did. And when he woke, he blushed from head to foot, feeling the blood rush back into his limbs, all his body healed and restored now, after the terrible battle with Ferdia and the wounds that had been put on him. But he started up in the next moment, and he asked Lugh Lá Fada how long he had been sleeping. And Lugh told him, 3 days and 3 nights. Cuchulainn said then, "This is terrible. All the army of Ireland to have been without anyone to oppose them for 3 days and nights, they must have devastated the province." But Lugh said, no. The province was defended. The boys' troop of Ulster came out of Auanmacha. They put aside their hurleys and they took up arms for the first time, and they were led by Fulliman, son of Cruthor Magnessa, and he swore an oath that he would not return to Auanmacha without the head of Ailill MacMurtough on his belt. They made a brave fight of it, Cuchulainn, and a great display. And they fought for 3 days and 3 nights, and they put down 3 times their own number. "Well, let us go to them then," Cuchulainn cried. He called out gladly. He put on his arms. But Lugh Lá Fada shook his head. "They're fallen, Cuchulainn, every one of them." When Cuchulainn heard that the boys' troop were all killed, he said, "We'll let you come with me then, and between the 2 of us we will make a terrible slaughter on the men of Ireland and avenge the boys' troop." But Lugh Lá Fada shook his head, saying, "I have no part in mortal quarrels. You may do what you like." And he returned then to the other world. Cuchulainn called to Laig to yoke the scythed chariot. And Laig put on the armour onto the horses that was studded with points and blades on every side. And he yoked them to the scythed chariot, a whirling thing with blades and points and spears on every angle of it. Cuchulainn leapt up into the chariot beside him, and Laig dressed himself in his light deerskin tunic, knowing that nothing dangerous would come near him when he was beside Cuchulainn in his rage. And the rage blazed within Cuchulainn, the hero light shone around him, and he had the appearance of a god. And he and Laig mowed through the army of the men of Ireland, back and forth, in and out, mowing them down as a scythe mows down wheat. All through that long day, he reddened every part of the scythed chariot and every one of his arms and weapons. Cuchulainn's body was reddened with wounds by the end of it too, when at last the hero light faded, and his anger for the boys' troop of Owen Macha was sated. The next day, Cuchulainn stood on the hillside, weary and wounded, and looked out over the army of the men of Ireland. And all of the women in that army, they wondered at the beauty of Cuchulainn when his appearance had been so terrible the day before. They stood up onto shields and made the men lift them over their heads so they could get a better look at the Hound of Ulster as he stood there and grieved for all that he had lost.
Thank you for listening to the Candlelit Tales podcast. We'll be back next week for part 4 of this 5-part episodes of the Táin. After all, it's our 5th birthday, so we're celebrating with releasing a new podcast every week. This is all made possible because of our Patreon supporters. Thank you very much to all of those who are already supporting us. If you want to become a patron, well, you go to patreon.com/Candlelit Tales. Not only are you helping us make this, but you're also helping those who can't afford to support us listen to it for free. So good on you. Extra brownie points. There's a tote bag for anyone who wants to become a new patron. Sorry about that. A tote bag for anyone who wants to become a new patron. So that's also very good because you get to find out a little bit more about our sources if you do become a patron on Patreon. And you'll get a new tote bag with Candlelit Tales on it. It's black, it's environmentally friendly, it's great. Anyway, thank you to all the people who are supporting us already, who made this podcast possible. That is a thank you to Anna, Anne, Aoife, April, Claire, Connie, Desi, Di, Emmett, Emma, Kiva, Margarita, Paulina, Pamela, not Paulina, Russell, Selena, Simone, and Sweeney. I'll get it right the next time. Thank you all very, very much. You're making it possible. Keep your candle lit. You.